So I'm actually finally getting around to reviewing this. And the funny thing is, after the series first aired, I actually had a review that I made of the whole show that I just never edited and uploaded. So, take two. We're doing it again. And because the series came out in June, yes, there's going to be spoilers in this video. After escaping custody in Avengers Endgame, Loki, played once again by Tom Hiddleston, gets captured by the mysterious Time Variance Authority, and then a lot of shit kind of happens from there. Loki was the Disney Plus MCU show I was least excited about, probably because it's a character that I was over, I was done, I didn't need any more Loki, and ironically, it's the show that I ended up loving the most. It was clear from the very first episode of Loki that this show was going to be much different than the other shows, and it looked like it was going to be a step up, which I really appreciated because WandaVision was mostly good and the Falcon and Winter Soldier was just kind of meh. So this looked like it was going to be a step up, and I was pretty pumped for that. And of course, a review of Loki has to start out by talking about Loki himself, played once again by Tom Hiddleston. This man is amazing in this show. It's probably the best he's ever played Loki. It's incredible. And they made me, someone who likes Loki but isn't like a huge Loki fan, a Loki fan. Tom Hiddleston is such a treat as this character, and his name is all over the credits of this show because not only is he the lead in it, he also executive produced it, so he was helping make decisions behind the scenes as well. He also did a 1-hour seminar plus a Q&A on day one of Loki to catch everyone up. This dude's a nerd. But I will say that the real treat and scene stealer of Loki was, of course, Mobius M. Mobius, played by Owen Wilson. He was a gem every time he was on screen, and the one episode he wasn't in, you could really feel it. You could feel that something was off. You start to miss the guy, and I'm so glad that Mobius is in season 2 of Loki. But my actual favorite character on the show would probably have to go to Sylvie, played by Sophia DiMartino. Sylvie was a female Loki who was taken by the TVA when she was little, escaped, and then was hiding out in apocalypses for years, where she spent God knows how long. And I did not expect to like this character as much as I did, but I ended up actually being really invested in Sylvie's storyline. And I was always like, every time she was on screen, I was like, all right, Sylvie's here. What's gonna happen this time? And of course, she's got her story, then Loki gets caught up in it. And one of the criticisms of this show is that Sylvie's the main character in a show called Loki, and I didn't really take issue with that, but if you are someone who took issue with that, I would like to remind you that Sylvie is a female Loki, and therefore the show's called Loki. They never specify which Loki the show is about. The TVA, the Time Variance Authority. These dudes are basically time cops, and one of my favorite parts about watching the show every week was the unfolding mystery of the TVA. Who they were, who was behind it, all that. The one question they never answered that I want them to answer in season 2 or Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania whenever they get around to it, where the hell is the Time Variance Authority? One of the complaints I hear about this show is that the first half is really that kind of mystery thriller about what the Time Variance Authority is, and then the back half is just a manhunt for Kang the Conqueror, or I guess He Who Remains. That is a valid criticism, and if you have that, criticism and you think that, I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm not going to argue against it. I never felt that issue. I always felt like the show had a natural segue between those two things. In fact, Episode 3 of the show, which is kind of a filler episode, which is a bummer, does really serve as a way to bridge the gap between those two storylines. 3 and the first half of 4 does, to kind of bridge it. So I think it works out well. But again, if you don't like that like difference between the two halves of the show, I completely get that. And so let's go episode by episode, because I think that's the easiest way to talk about a show like this that's short and not 20 episodes long. And that's how I do it with all my MCU show reviews, so we're going to keep that up here. Episode 1 is the best premiere of any MCU show. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It hooked me on the show immediately. After watching it, I knew this show was going to be something special and a step up from the other two. I'm glad the quality of it never faltered. But I am hoping Moon Knight takes the crown, because it'd be cool if each show could be a step up. I know that's not possible, but I really want Moon Knight to take the crown. I have a lot of faith in that show. In the first episode, Loki's character arc through the MCU, obviously he doesn't have that because this is 2012 Loki, so they fast track it by basically showing him footage of his future, showing Frigga's death and then him and Thor being like good buddies, and then Loki's death. And it is so fast-paced. In like 5 minutes, Loki just goes through all the character development that it took him 5 movies to go through. Is it jarring at first? Yes. In fact, I think after I watched the episode the first time, I had like come to terms with it. I was like, it's not an issue, but it's super jarring. So yeah, it's a jarring transition, but somehow they do make it work in this sort of natural way. And episode 1 really just devotes all its time to establishing who Loki is, and then the meat and potatoes of the show is teased at the end when they set up that they're hunting a variant of Loki, right? And that is when the show starts to get pretty radical. And something worth mentioning here is Natalie Holt's score for this show. It is amazing throughout all 6 episodes, but I like to single it out for the first episode because the first episode has some of my favorite like musical cues in the whole show. Some of my favorite tracks being the main Loki theme, the TVA First View, and then the Loki Green theme. I think those are the 3 best pieces of music for this show. It is the music's so good, and it's so unlike anything else in the MCU. It feels like such a disconnect musically, and it's amazing. Episode 2 is interesting because it's slower than the first episode, but the first episode wasn't particularly fast-paced either. Half of it's an investigation where Loki figures out that the variant, as they're dubbing it, is hiding in apocalypses, and whoever's idea it was, I'm assuming it was Michael Waldron's idea, to have her hiding in apocalypses is a genius. And then they travel to Roxxcart in 2050 where they kind of track her down through deduction. It's pretty cool. And then it's revealed that she's female and Loki follows her through a time portal, and that's when I was sold on this show. I'm like, we got female Loki in here. Well, it's female Loki combined with Enchantress, so they combine those 2 characters. And then we have Loki clearly about to get mischievous. Mobius just lost Loki. I'm like, this is getting cool. Things are ramping up. I'm pumped. And that's a third of the way through the show. The shows are so short now, aren't they? 2 episodes in, you're already a third of the way through the show. The third episode of the show is the worst episode of the show. Just about everyone can agree with that. The issue is that this third episode feels the most like filler, which is generally not something you want in a 6-episode show. I wouldn't say the episode is necessarily filler because it does move things forward. You learn about the TVA, you learn about Sylvie, and then that relationship is built between them. But in terms of like the main plot of the show, it's basically just Loki and Sylvie hiking through the desert in an attempt to find an iPad charger, and that's all they do for 40 minutes or however long the episode is. So it definitely does feel like the weakest thing, and you kind of wish something would be happening, but nothing really happens. It feels like a better episode of it feels like if the Book of Boba Fett episodes were better, in the sense that nothing is happening, but there's still actually cool stuff going on. But you can skip this episode and not miss much, I guess is the best way you can sum that up. And yeah, Loki falls in love with himself. Has to be addressed because of the controversy that arises from it. Man, people just won't shut the hell up about it, will they? Yeah, it makes sense Loki would fall in love with himself. They even address in the next episode that it's super narcissistic. And speaking of episode 4, that brings us to episode 4, which is the best episode of this show, and probably the best episode of the live-action Disney Plus shows in general. I would say best overall, but the Doctor Strange episode of What If exists, and that one is the best. It is exciting from start to finish. It's got a bunch of twists and turns. After the episode came out, I deleted the video within like a day, but when the episode first came out, I had recorded my reaction right as it ended, and my jaw was just gone. It was all the way on the floor. I loved what they did with this episode. It's so good. The episode starts with Loki and Sylvie causing a Nexus event in an apocalypse, which is something that you're not supposed to be able to create a Nexus event during. So these two people manage to break the timeline at a point that can't be broken. I don't know if that was just a mistake or if that was intentional, but damn, Loki. We get to see Sif back. They confirm that Loki's in love with Sylvie, and then they confirm everyone at the TVA is a variant, and then Mobius gets pruned, which hurt my soul and really hurt my dad's soul. It's funny because my dad hates spoilers, but the moment Mobius got pruned, he looked over at me and asked if Mobius is actually dead. But it gets better because then we see the Timekeepers and learn that they're all robots. And then it ends with Loki getting pruned and waking up at the end of time where there's a bunch of other Lokis. The episode just never slows down. It never gets boring. It is exciting from start to finish. No wonder it was one of Tom Hiddleston's favorite episodes. And with episode 4 comes my biggest criticism of the show, and that's the action. The reason I never really noticed it earlier is because one of the only really big fights in the show up to that point was drunk Loki fighting a bunch of cops. So I didn't really think anything of it. But this episode, when you have Loki and Sylvie actually throwing down with the TVA guys, it's not as exciting as it should be, which is a bummer because Loki has had some pretty solid action scenes in the past. Just look at the final fight in Thor or him fighting Cap in Avengers. The dude's had some pretty cool action scenes, and this is such a step down. All the non-action scenes in Loki are amazing, and all the action scenes aren't. And episode 5 introduces the man, the myth, the legend, classic Loki, played by Richard E. Grant. This man kills the role. I want a Loki spin-off show just called Classic Loki that was a spin-off of a spin-off of a sequel to a spin-off. That's what that would be. I like this episode. I like Classic Loki. I like President Loki for like 30 seconds we see him. All of President Loki's in the trailer, which is a bummer. I adore Alligator Loki or Alla Loki, whatever they called him. He's amazing. And I love Mobius's little Loki paradox bit he gets into. But does this episode really need to be here? Sure, it provides a lot of backstory. It goes in with Eliath and all that stuff. It introduces the Citadel and talks about what happens to things that are pruned. But I've always just had this feeling that episode 5 did not need to be in this show. That said, I enjoy the shit out of it. But classic Loki recreating Asgard and using it to trick Eliath before dying like a badass is one of the coolest things. Man, I'm gonna miss that dude. He was great. We need to find a way to bring him back. You guys wanna know what's interesting? Episode 6. Because episode 6, by all accounts, should be boring. It is 90% exposition. But episode 6 is not boring. And that is because of one man. Jonathan Majors plays He Who Remains. And he is so charming and so charismatic in this role that while he goes on like this 15-minute spiel just talking non-stop, you are just so invested in what he's saying just because of Jonathan Majors' screen presence. I cannot wait to see him as Kang the Conqueror. Kind of wish it wasn't an Ant-Man movie, though. And there's this interesting tidbit about the character I love. For most of the episode, he just looks bored because he knows everything that's going to happen. But the moment they cross the threshold, he is so invested. He's basically the audience watching the show. And his face when Loki and Sylvie kiss is so funny. Let's talk about the controversial final moments of this show, because this show ends in a very unsatisfying and unfulfilling way. It ends with Sylvie killing He Who Remains, breaking the timeline, and then Loki goes back to the TVA. Mobius doesn't know who he is, and there's a statue of Kang the Conqueror, and it ends right there saying Loki will be back in Season 2. A lot of people don't like that, saying it's just an advertisement for Season 2 and nothing more. And these are the same people who have been watching TV for years and should know that a lot of seasons of television end on a cliffhanger designed to set up the next season. I love this ending, though. It gets me super hyped for what's to come in Doctor Strange and Ant-Man. The writer of this show is writing Multiverse of Madness, by the way. It also helps set up some elements of What If and No Way Home, so it kind of ties the whole multiverse saga together. I don't take issue with it being designed to set up future installments of the MCU, because ever since 2008, the MCU has been setting up future installments of the MCU. It's nothing new, and I don't know why people are starting to shit on it now. Loki is a great show. I'm so glad it turned out well, and I hope Season 2 is just as good, if not better. And I find it so funny that I was not hyped at all for this show and then ended up loving it. I thought it was going to be an unnecessary cash grab designed to make a nickel off a character who had a perfect death. And let's be honest, it is kind of a cash grab designed to make an extra nickel off a character who had a perfect death. But you know what? They made that cash grab very well. And I'm glad it turned out well, and I'm glad they actually cared and tried. I'm so glad that we have a high bar for these shows, because before this, they were all fine or really good until they screwed up their finale in an unforgivable way. Yeah, I'm fucking looking at you, WandaVision. How did you screw up your ending that badly? And Loki is the one of the bunch that is also paced much better. It feels like an actual show and not just a movie that they made unnecessarily long. Something with, less so with WandaVision, but you could still do it with WandaVision, mainly with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and once again with Hawkeye, is all of these are just 2.5 hour movies spread out across a really long time, and Loki's the first one where it actually felt like it was paced like a TV show, and let's hope they can figure it out for the rest of the shows. So, there you guys go. I'm not going to grade Loki. It's harder to grade TV shows. I try not to grade TV shows, but I really enjoyed Loki. Finally actually getting around to review it and catching up, getting the last of those MCU reviews out there that I haven't done. So, what did you guys think of Loki? Are you excited for Season 2? Are you excited for Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness? Let me know all that down in the comments below. Also, leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCU HQ. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.